Welcome to the human wild, where we chase the stories that history tried to bury, the ones that make you lean closer to the fire and wonder what else is out there, hidden in the shadows of time. Today, we're stepping into a world of ice and mystery, a place where the most feared warriors of the medieval age, Viking raiders who struck terror from Ireland to Constantinople, found themselves trembling, not from cold, but from dread. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a frozen forest, the kind where the snow swallows sound and the air stings your lungs. You're a Viking, axe in hand, your longship moored on a distant shore, and yet, despite all your battles, all your victories, you feel it. A prickle on your neck, the unshakable sense that something is watching you from the endless white. That's where this story takes us. To Biarmaland, a forgotten realm in what's now Finland, northwestern Russia, and the Kola Peninsula, home to a people called the Biamians. These weren't just survivors in a brutal land. They were masters who turned the very forest into a weapon, a people so enigmatic they haunted the nightmares of the Norse. This is their story, and it's one you won't believe is real. Let's set the stage. It's the Viking Age, roughly 793 to 1066 CE, a time when the Norse were rewriting the map of Europe. Their longships, sleek and swift, carried them across oceans and up rivers, raiding monasteries, settling lands, and trading as far as Baghdad. They were farmers, explorers, and warriors, their culture built on courage and reputation, where a man's worth was measured by the sagas sung about him. By the 9th century, their reach was staggering. Settlements in Ireland, England, and Iceland, a fledgling state in Russia called the Kievan Rus, even threats against Paris. The Vikings were the ultimate predators, fearless and unstoppable, their names whispered in terror across coasts and countryside. But history, as we love to uncover here at the Human Wild, is never that simple. Because in the far north, in the dense forests and snow-covered tundra, there was a people who didn't just resist the Vikings, they made them afraid. The Biamians lived in a world the Vikings could barely comprehend. Their land, Biarmaland, was a frontier of perpetual snow, a place the Norse saw as the edge of the known world, where giants and spirits roamed in their sagas. But the Biamians were no myth. They were real flesh and blood, and their threat was tangible. They weren't like the Norse with their farms and hierarchies. The Biamians were semi-nomadic, moving with the seasons, hunting, fishing, and trading across vast territories. Their society was egalitarian, led by those with skill or spiritual power, not kings or warlords. They didn't build fortresses or muster armies, but they didn't need to. Their weapon was the land itself, the deep forests, the blinding snow, the silence that could hide a hunter or a killer. Imagine you're a Viking, stepping off your ship onto a frozen shore. You're used to raids where you strike fast, overwhelm your enemies, and sail away with plunder. But here, the rules are different. The forest stretches endlessly before you, dark and quiet, the snow muffling your steps. You feel eyes on you, but when you turn, there's nothing, just trees and white. Then, without warning, an arrow whispers through the air, dropping your scout before he can cry out. You draw your sword, but there's no one to fight, no tracks to follow. That's what the Biamians did. They didn't meet you in battle. They haunted you, striking and vanishing like spirits. A runic inscription near Trondheim, carved around 950 CE, captures it perfectly. Beware the watchers in the white forest. They see without being seen, they kill without warning. They are not men as we know men. That's not just a warning. It's a confession of fear from a people who prided themselves on fearlessness. What made the Biamians so terrifying? It wasn't numbers or weapons. It was their mastery of their world. They knew every path through the forest, every frozen lake that could bear their weight but not yours. They wore furs. Reindeer for bitter cold, seal for wet snow, fox for lightness that kept them warm while your wool cloak grew heavy and useless. They glided on skis and snowshoes, moving like ghosts while you floundered. An Arab traveler, Ibrahim ibn Ahmed, who joined Viking traders around 920 CE, described them. They move across the snow like spirits, their feet bound with strange devices that keep them from sinking. Those devices were tools refined over centuries, letting the Biamians strike from a distance and disappear before you could blink. Their shelters were another marvel. While Vikings huddled in longhouses, the Biamians built lodges dug into the earth for warmth or temporary huts from branches and hides, set up in hours and gone by morning. They could move entire communities, leaving nothing for raiders to find. This wasn't just survival. It was strategy, turning the landscape into a maze where the Vikings were always lost. And it wasn't just physical. The Biamians played with the Norse mind, leaving strange symbols on trees or bones arranged in patterns that screamed ritual. To a Viking, raised on tales of spirits and omens, this wasn't just a fight. It was a descent into something otherworldly. This story isn't just about a forgotten people. It's about what happens when the unstoppable meets the immovable. The Vikings reshaped Europe, but in Biarmaland, they met their match. The Biamians didn't need to conquer or destroy. They just needed to endure, to make every Viking step into their land a gamble with fear. And that's what we're diving into today. A tale of survival, cunning, and a people who turned their wilderness into a fortress. So, grab something warm, settle in, and let's walk into the frozen heart of Biarmaland, where the Vikings learned what it meant to be hunted. You're a Viking now, standing in the snow, your breath clouding in the frigid air. Your men are tense, gripping their axes, scanning the trees for any sign of life. You've raided villages before, faced armies, laughed at storms. But here in Biarmaland, something feels wrong. The silence is too deep, the forest too still. You've heard the tales. Camps found empty, sentries dead without a sound, strange marks in the snow that lead nowhere. You tell yourself it's just stories, that no one can scare a Norse warrior. But deep down you feel it, you're not the hunter here. The Biamians are watching, and they're waiting. What made them so good at this? Let's start with their home. Biarmaland wasn't a place you could conquer with a ship or a sword. The forests were dense, tangled with roots and shadows. The winters were brutal, with snow so deep it could swallow a man whole. The Vikings were tough, but they were built for coasts and rivers, for milder climates where you could farm in summer and raid in winter. The Biamians, though, were born for the cold. Archaeological digs from the 9th and 10th centuries show a people who'd cracked the code of survival. Their clothing was a science. Layered furs chosen for the weather. Reindeer for the deepest freeze. Seal for wet snow. Fox or marten for quick movement. Compare that to your sodden wool cloak, dragging you down, and you see why the Vikings struggled. Then there was their mobility. Skis and snowshoes weren't just tools. They were extensions of the Biamians themselves. While you're sinking knee-deep in snow, they're gliding over it, silent and swift. Ibrahim ibn Ahmed, that Arab traveler from 920 CE, wrote, "They pull their goods on sleds that glide effortlessly where our horses would founder and die." These weren't crude inventions. They were refined over generations. Some skis built for speed across open tundra, others for weaving through dense trees. The Biamians could cross miles in hours, strike a camp, and vanish before you could light a fire. Their shelters were just as clever, half-buried lodges for winter warmth or quick huts that could vanish with them. You'd raid a village, find it empty, and realize you'd been chasing a shadow. But it wasn't just about moving fast. The Biamians turned their land into a weapon. Imagine you're leading a raid, following a path that looks promising. Suddenly, the ground gives way. A pit trap, hidden under snow, lined with stakes. Or you follow a trail only to find it circles back to where you started, with arrows flying from the trees. The Biamians knew every bog, every frozen river that would crack under your weight but hold theirs. They built hidden paths through marshes, set traps along routes you'd likely take, and used the snow itself as a cloak. The saga of Olaf Tryggvason tells of a raid in 995 CE, where a Viking named Thoria took 30 men into the White Forests. For 3 days, they saw nothing but felt watched. On the 4th morning, their sentries were dead, throats cut silently, with strange marks in the snow. Only 11 men made it back, And they wouldn't speak of what they saw. That's where the real terror came in. The Biamians didn't just fight. They haunted. They were masters of psychological warfare, using the Vikings' own beliefs against them. The Norse were superstitious, raised on tales of spirits and gods. The Biamians leaned into that, leaving carved symbols on trees or bones arranged in eerie patterns. One saga describes a Viking camp waking to find their dead arranged in a circle, eyes removed, with wolf tracks all around but no sign of how they got there. Modern analysis says these were staged scenes, designed to make the Vikings think they were facing something supernatural. It worked. The Vikings, used to being the unseen threat, found themselves jumping at shadows, whispering about spirits that could kill without a trace. Their combat style was just as unnerving. Vikings loved open battle, shield walls, war cries, the clash of steel. The Biamians? They didn't play that game. Their graves hold lightweight bows, slender spears, and curved knives, built for silent, precise kills. They avoided direct fights, striking only when they had the advantage. Ambushes at dawn, night raids that left one man dead and the rest terrified. They targeted leaders and scouts, knowing a single death could break a warband's nerve. A mass grave near the White Sea, dated to 925 CE, holds 15 Vikings, 12 killed with identical wounds, a blade to the skull or spine. That's not a brawl. That's surgical. This wasn't random. The Biamians trained their fighters from childhood, not for glory but for survival. Archaeological sites show training grounds where kids learned to move silently or hit tiny targets with arrows. A 1070 CE chronicle from Novgorod describes them. They select certain children before they can walk, raising them to endure cold, move without sound, and kill without remorse. Exaggerated? Maybe. But it points to a disciplined system, like proto-special forces, that turned young Biamians into the watchers in the White Forest the Vikings feared. They didn't need to outnumber you. They just needed to make you feel like the forest itself was against you. Now, let's step deeper into the Biamian world, because their power wasn't just in their tactics. It was in their soul. You're still that Viking, your men growing jumpy as the days stretch on in Biarmaland. Every rustle in the trees feels like a threat, every shadow a potential killer. But what really gets under your skin isn't the ambushes or the traps. It's the sense that these people aren't just fighting you. They're part of something bigger, something tied to the land itself. The Biamians didn't just live in their forests. They were one with them, their beliefs and rituals weaving a web of mystery that made even the bravest Norse warrior question what was real. Their spirituality was the heart of it. The Biamians practiced a shamanic faith, where the forest, the snow, the animals were alive with spirits. Unlike the Vikings, whose gods like Odin or Thor lived in a structured cosmology, the Biamians saw the sacred everywhere. Their shamans didn't just talk to spirits, they became them. Archaeological sites across Biarmaland reveal ceremonial drums, masks of bark and bone, and sculptures showing humans shifting into animals. One saga from around 920 CE describes a ritual. Their shaman wore a bear's skull atop his head, its teeth gleaming, and a cloak of white furs that glowed in the firelight. He beat a drum painted with symbols no man could read, and others began to howl like wolves, crawling on all fours. To you, a Viking hiding in the trees, this isn't just a ceremony. It's proof these people can cross into another world. These rituals weren't just for show. The Biamians used them to terrify. They knew the Vikings were superstitious, raised on tales of shapeshifters and spirits. So they leaned in, staging encounters that felt supernatural. They carved spirit posts, wooden pillars with human and animal faces, along paths you might take, making you feel watched by something beyond human. One account in the Hålogaland manuscript describes a Viking party finding a clearing with a circle of antlers, their own scouts' bodies inside, eyes removed, and wolf tracks leading nowhere. Modern scholars say this was a setup, with the Biamians using tricks to hide their tracks and stage the scene. But to you, it's witchcraft, plain and simple. Their treatment of the dead was even more unsettling. While Vikings burned or buried their dead with grave goods, the Biamians preserved theirs. Archaeological digs show mummified bodies, dried with smoke and resins, wrapped in birch bark and hides, kept in sacred lodges. These weren't hidden away, they were guardians, consulted by shamans in rituals that made the Vikings' blood run cold. Imagine stumbling into one of these lodges, the air thick with the scent of pine and decay, and seeing a figure with leathery skin and hollow eyes, looking like it could rise at any moment. To the Norse, who believed in clear lines between life and death, this was a violation of nature itself. This spiritual edge gave the Biamians a psychological weapon as sharp as any blade. They didn't just fight, they unnerved. They'd leave your camp untouched except for one dead sentry, his throat cut silently. They'd move your sword just out of reach, leaving no footprints. One saga tells of Vikings waking to find strange runes carved near their fire, mimicking Norse ones but twisted into something alien. Every act was designed to make you feel powerless, like the forest was alive and working against you. And in a way, it was the Biamians were its heartbeat, using every tree, every snowdrift to outwit you. Their fighters were another layer of this mystery. Unlike Viking warriors who sought fame in battle, Biamian fighters were trained for stealth and efficiency. Their graves hold lightweight bows, spears built for quick kills, and knives with curved blades perfect for silent work. They struck from shadows, targeting your leaders to sow chaos. The saga of Halfdan the Black, from 870 CE, describes them. They killed a sentry and vanished before the blood ceased to flow. When pursued, they ran toward cliffs and disappeared as if the rock swallowed them. The secret? Footwear that spread their weight, white fur cloaks for camouflage, and hidden escape routes they'd spent years carving out. This wasn't instinct, it was training. The Biamians had secret hunting societies, selecting kids young and raising them to be ghosts in the forest. Archaeological sites show training areas where they practiced moving silently or shooting arrows at tiny targets. They learned to endure cold that would kill you, to kill without hesitation, and to vanish without a trace. A chronicle from Novgorod in 1070 CE calls them neither fully human nor fully animal, but something between that inspires terror. That's the kind of reputation that makes even Viking warlords think twice. Let's talk about what brought the Vikings to Biarmaland, because this wasn't just about conquest, it was about desire. You're a Viking merchant now, standing in the markets of Constantinople, surrounded by silks, spices, and gold. But the real treasure, the one that makes kings and caliphs open their purses, comes from the frozen north. It's called soft gold. Furs so fine they feel like a dream, walrus ivory whiter than any elephant's tusk, amber glowing like honey with insects trapped inside. These come from Biarmaland, and the people guarding them, the Biamians, aren't about to let you take them easily. Here at the human wild, we know that wealth can drive men to face their fears, and that's what kept the Vikings coming back, despite the terror. The Biamians were masters of their resources. Their land was harsh, but it was rich Arctic fox, sable, and marten pelts that could buy a ship or a warband. A single black fox pelt was worth more than its weight in gold in Baghdad. Walrus tusks were carved into ornaments when elephant ivory ran short. Amber, found along the White Sea, was prized for its beauty and supposed magic. Even falcons, the best hunting birds in the world, came from Biamian traps, destined for noble courts. Ahmad ibn Fadlan, an Arab diplomat in 922 CE, wrote of medicines that cure any ailment, potions that inflame desire, and talismans that protect against harm. The Biamians knew how to trap, preserve, and trade these goods, turning their wilderness into a gold mine. This wealth created a tense dance between the Vikings and Biamians. The Norse wanted control, to cut out the middlemen and seize the source. But Biarmaland wasn't a place you could just raid. The Biamians held the upper hand, and they made sure every transaction came at a cost. There were three ways this played out. First, direct trade at neutral sites like Steria Latiga, where both sides met under strict rules. The saga of Einar Odd describes it. When the ice breaks, the Biamians come with sleds of furs and ivory. For 9 days, they trade in peace, their shamans and our priests declaring the time sacred. Excavations show ritual sites where oaths were sworn, ensuring no one drew a weapon. Second, there was indirect trade through middlemen like the Karelians. A Norwegian merchant in 950 CE complained, "They demand pure silver and weigh each coin with care." When asked about the fur's source, they say the Biamians would kill any who revealed it. This frustrated the Vikings, who hated paying premiums and losing control. Third, and riskiest, were trade raids, attempts to steal the goods outright. The saga of Olaf Tryggvason tells of a 995 CE raid, where Olaf sailed to a treasure house of furs and ivory. His men filled 12 chests, but by the third day, only one ship returned, with 8 survivors speaking of horrors no man should witness. A White Sea site shows a storage structure attacked by Vikings, but also the aftermath, scattered Norse remains, caught in a deadly counterattack. These raids rarely worked. The Biamians didn't just guard their goods. They made raiders pay in blood. Over time, most Vikings realized trade, even on Biamian terms, was safer. This wasn't just about economics, it was about power. The Vikings wanted to dominate, but the Biamians, with their traps, ambushes, and mastery of the land, stayed in control. They weren't just protecting furs. They were guarding their way of life, their right to say, "This is ours." And that brings us to something even more unexpected about them. Something that shook the Vikings to their core. You're back in Biarmaland, a Viking warrior, your shield heavy in the snow. You've faced death before, but nothing prepares you for what you see now. A woman, tall and fierce, leading a warband. Her cloak is covered in symbols that hurt to look at, her bow drawn with deadly calm. Before you can react, an arrow takes your leader through the eye, and her fighters vanish into the forest. This isn't a saga's shield maiden or a mythical Valkyrie. This is a Biamian woman, and she's real. Here at the Human Wild, we love when history flips the script, and the Biamians did just that, with women who wielded power in ways the Vikings couldn't fathom. In Norse society, men ruled the battlefield. Women could own property, divorce, even practice magic as vulvas. But leadership and war were male domains. The Biamians didn't follow those rules. Their women were shamans, chieftains, and warriors, earning respect through skill, not birth. Adam of Bremen, writing in the 11th century, said, "Among the Biamians, women may become shamans and chieftains with power equal to or greater than men. They lead war parties and practice divination through means too profane to describe." Archaeological evidence backs this up. Biamian graves show women buried with bows, shamanic drums, carved staffs, and divination tools, polished stones, inscribed bones. One grave near Lake Onega holds a 40-year-old woman with a drum, a bow, and a staff of office. Another near the White Sea has silver ornaments mixing Biamian and Norse designs, suggesting she traded as well as fought. These women were a shock to the Vikings. The saga of Einar Odd describes a female leader. She carried a bow of horn and bone, her cloak adorned with symbols that hurt the eye. When she raised her hand, her warriors attacked without sound. When she lowered it, they vanished like mist. Another account, from a merchant in 950 CE, tells of a woman leading a trading party. Her face was tattooed with blue lines. She tested silver with her teeth, examined cloth by smell. When our captain tried to cheat her, she caught it and threatened to end trade. These weren't exceptions. They were central to Biamian society, leading rituals, battles, and negotiations. This challenged everything the Vikings knew. The saga of Rolf the Good tells of a warrior who refused to admit he'd been defeated by a woman, claiming they fought spirits who took female form to shame them. It's almost comical, tough Norse men, unable to handle losing to a woman, so they called her a ghost. But it shows how deeply this shook them. Biamian women didn't need male approval. Their power came from their skills and their connection to the spirits. They led ambushes, planned defenses, and set trade terms, forcing Vikings to adapt or lose access to Biarmaland's wealth. This had a lasting impact. Viking settlements with heavy Biamian trade, like those in northern Norway, show women taking on bigger roles in commerce by the 10th century. Even Norse sagas changed. Later stories of shield maidens and valkyries describe women who blend martial skill and spiritual power, much like Biamian leaders. Archaeologist Inga Havard Dyhr argues, the valkyrie evolved from a battlefield spirit to a figure who wields weapons and magic, reflecting the Biamian women Vikings encountered. The Biamians didn't just resist, they reshaped how the Norse saw strength and gender. Now, let's step into the moment when this clash came to a head, because the Viking Biamian story wasn't just a series of skirmishes. It built to a battle so devastating it changed everything. You're a Viking under King Olaf II of Norway, a man later called St. Olaf, sailing into the White Sea in 1026 CE. Your fleet of 15 longships carries 500 warriors, priests with crosses, and a mission to conquer Biarmaland. You're not just here for furs, you're here to claim a pagan land for Christ and crown. But the Biamians have other plans, and what's coming will go down in history as the Battle of the Sleeping Fires. Olaf was no ordinary raider. A zealous Christian, he saw Biarmaland as a double prize, a source of wealth and a pagan stronghold to crush. The saga of Olaf Haraldsson records his vow. Before the next winter's snow, I will bring the northern lands under my rule. Archaeological digs near Trondheim show shipyards busy in 1026, building shallow draft vessels for coastal raids. Runic inscriptions mention a great northern journey. This was a full-scale invasion with 500 men, huge for the time, aiming to end Biamian resistance once and for all. You sail around the Kola Peninsula, the wind biting, your men eager for glory. The first villages you find are empty. Fires burning, food warm, but no people. Olaf calls it fear, saying the Biamians fled his might. His priests set up crosses, baptizing rivers, claiming the land. But you feel it. The silence isn't surrender. It's a warning. The Biamians are watching, pulling back in a planned retreat. Archaeological sites show these villages were emptied deliberately, valuables gone, structures left to lure you deeper. For 20 days you face no resistance, pushing up the northern Dvina River. Then the signs start. Scouts vanish without a cry. At night, drums echo, voices chant in a strange tongue. Figures appear in the trees, but arrows find only bark. Olaf calls it demonic, leading prayers to keep your spirits up. By midsummer, you reach Lake Canero, a sacred Biamian site. From the river, you see an island with buildings gleaming like silver, smoke rising from hearths. Olaf thinks he's found their main settlement, ripe for plunder. He orders 10 ships to approach, 5 in reserve. You're on one of those ships, heart pounding, expecting a fight, but it's a trap. The buildings are decoys, their roofs polished birch bark or mica, built to shine from a distance. As you hit the shore, burning arrows fly from hidden forest positions. Not ordinary arrows, but ones carrying a fiery mix of resin, fat, and sulfur, like Greek fire. Excavations confirm ceramic containers and specialized arrowheads for this. Your ships burn, forcing you into the water, where archers pick you off. Warriors emerge from hidden passages in the abandoned buildings, trapping you between 2 fronts. The reserve ships try to save you, but more fire rains down, sinking 3. Then the river behind you is blocked, trees felled by the Biamians cutting off escape. At night, the forest lights up with torches, revealing a massive Biamian force, their drums pounding, shamans dancing. You don't sleep, knowing what's coming. At dawn, a mist rolls across the lake. You think it's cover for retreat, but then your eyes burn, your lungs seize. It's no mist, it's sulfur dioxide, a toxic cloud the Biamians created by burning materials in the forest. Combined with arrows and ambushes, it's a slaughter. Only 2 ships escape, with fewer than 60 men. Olaf survives, but he's broken, coughing blood, his strength gone. The Battle of the Sleeping Fires wasn't just a defeat, it was a statement. You're one of those survivors, limping back to Norway, the screams of your comrades still in your ears. Biarmaland isn't just a place. It's a force, one that broke the mightiest Viking army ever sent north. Here at the Human Wild, we live for these moments when history turns, when the underdog rewrites the rules. Let's walk through what happened next, because this battle didn't just end a campaign. It changed the North forever. The saga of Olaf Haraldsson says Biarmaland became a place of dread. Mothers scared children with tales of Biamian shamans who stole breath from sleeping warriors. Sailors crossed themselves at the mention of the North. The Vikings had faced losses before, but this was different. They'd been outplayed by a people they'd called primitive, using tactics, fire, poison, traps that felt like sorcery. Never again would a Norse king try a conquest like Olaf's. The psychological scar ran deep, a reminder that even the mightiest could be humbled. But the world doesn't stop for one battle. The 11th century was a time of change. The Vikings were becoming kingdoms, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, tied to Christian Europe. Raiding gave way to trade, longships to merchant cogs. For the Biamians, this meant new pressures but also new possibilities. The old cycle of raids and ambushes slowed, replaced by a wary coexistence. Trade became the bridge. Those furs, ivory, and amber were still too valuable to ignore, and archaeological sites show trading posts like Staraya Latiga evolving. By the late 11th century, these weren't just armed camps but places where cultures mixed. Biamian motifs on Norse jewelry, Norse tools with northern designs. A Norwegian cleric in 1150 CE wrote, "Where our grandfathers sought plunder in dragon ships, now merchants sail with cloth and silver to trade for furs. The forest people meet us at markets, under the protection of their spirits and our God." It wasn't all peaceful. The Vikings still wanted control, and the Biamians guarded their autonomy fiercely. But new threats were rising: the Hanseatic League, Novgorod's expansion, Christian missionaries. A Biamian account, preserved in a Finnish manuscript, says, "The Karelians press from the west, Novgorod from the south with crosses and swords. Our old enemies, the Northmen, offer alliance, for we must stand together or fall." Excavations showed joint defenses along Biarmaland's southern borders, with Norse and Biamian tools side by side. The Biamians adapted, some moving north to preserve their ways, others settling near trading towns, blending with Karelians or Sami. A 1290 CE missionary wrote, "The last true Biamians dwell beyond the northern mountains, keeping their dead and spirits. Each year, fewer remain, as the young seek trading towns or baptism." Their world was shrinking. Sacred sites became churches, hunting grounds claimed by Novgorod. A Hanseatic merchant in 1230 CE noted, "The old woman leading the Biamian traders has fewer furs each year. Their best grounds are now poached by others." The Vikings changed too, their old ways fading into Christian kingdoms. A merchant in 1340 CE wrote, "My grandfather spoke of Biamian witch women who called storms. Now I trade with them, Christians like us, though their customs are strange." The fear was gone, the reality of Biarmaland fading into legend. But the Biamians left their mark in art, spirituality, and tactics that shaped northern cultures. Let's bring this story home, because the Biamians aren't just a footnote, they're a lesson in what it means to stand your ground. Here at the Human Wild, we chase stories that remind us of the fire in humanity, the ability to face giants and come out stronger. The Biamians were no empire, no army. They were a small people in a frozen land, facing the Vikings at the height of their power. Yet they didn't just survive. They thrived, making Biarmaland a place where even the fiercest warriors tread with caution. Their secret? They knew their world better than anyone. Skis, furs, traps, and rituals turned their wilderness into a fortress. They didn't fight Viking-style battles. They struck from shadows, used the land as a weapon, and made fear their ally. Their women led with bows and shamanic drums, challenging Norse ideas of power. Their wealth, furs, ivory, amber, kept them independent, forcing the Vikings to trade rather than conquer. And when the world changed, with Christianity and new powers rising, they adapted, blending into other cultures while leaving traces of their spirit. The Battle of the Sleeping Fires was their greatest triumph, a moment when they used fire, poison, and strategy to crush Olaf's army. But their real victory was longer lasting. They proved that power isn't just numbers or swords. It's knowing who you are and what you're fighting for. Historian Alina Kuzanen says it best. The Biamians' legacy isn't in monuments, but in proving survival doesn't need conventional victory. They made domination too costly, forcing accommodation. They never raided Norway or conquered Viking lands. They just made sure Biarmaland stayed theirs. This speaks to us today. In a world that often feels like it's flattening the unique, the Biamians remind us that you can resist by being true to your roots, by using what you have, whether it's a forest, a skill, or a belief. They show that the wild in us, the part that refuses to bend, can outlast even the mightiest foes. So, next time you're out in the wild, feeling the wind or the silence, think of the Biamians, those watchers in the white forest who turned fear into a weapon and carved their story into history. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the human wild. If this tale of forgotten warriors lit a spark in you, hit that subscribe button, share it with someone who loves a good story, and drop a comment below. What other hidden histories do you want us to uncover? Until next time, stay wild.